I'm your host, Craig Winn. You can see that we're here in a slightly different studio setup. We're trying to get a little further away from the east trade winds that blow through these islands and to get to a little quieter place. And hopefully, this will work out well for us. Um, we are now starting a new series. It's actually a continuation of an old series, but since it's been a while since we've been there, we're going to give it a new name and begin with A Voice, Episode 1. Where we left off in the series called Coming Home was with Dode's 103rd Mizmor or Psalm. And we're going to pick up our story there because it's never a good idea to overlook the Son of God. Well, now that we've begun to understand and expound upon the role that Dode plays, particularly in communicating Yahweh's message and fulfilling his Father's promises, because Dode is the one who fulfilled the promise to give us eternal life, to perfect us, and to adopt us into God's family. And he expounds on all of those things in this 103rd Mizmor, which opens by revealing that it was written either for Dode, to Dode, concerning Dode, or on the wisdom of appreciating God's beloved Son. Coming home to Yahweh through Dode necessitates coming to appreciate and accept the essential role the Messiah, King, and Son of God has played in the salvation of humanity and indeed his people. He is the central figure in God's story, the exemplar of Israel and of the covenant. He portrays precisely what God is trying to achieve through the covenant relationship with his beloved Son, and he most certainly embodies the good and the bad, the hopes and aspirations, as well as the travesties of Israel. Um, so Dode is all of these things. He is the story, just not part of the story. And he not only fulfilled the Moedim, these restoring witnesses to the eternal meetings, but the benefits of the Mikre are also more readily grasped when we viewed them really in conjunction with Dode's life and lives, because he would live three of them, and his lyrics, especially Dode's father and son relationship with Yahowah. We have Leah back now, and Leah has just kidnapped the co-host of this program. So I'd like to file a report because the Wookiee has been Wookiee nabbed, and he doesn't even seem to be bothered by it at the least. So, Miss Leah, you can see we're now out in our new studio. We did a little move while you were gone. This is our first broadcast, however, from our new location. So, as Leah knows, Dode is Yahweh's most cherished and capable individual of all time. He is the Masiach, the Messiah, the Melech, King, Ben, Son, Bakor, firstborn, Zeroah, sacrificial lamb, Yasha, Savior, Ra'ah, shepherd, Shemach, branch, Sion, the signs posted along the way, Gabor, the most capable and courageous of all men, Gabriel, the most compassionate and capable man of God, Chesed, the most compassionate and generous, Gaal, the kinsman redeemer, and of course he was a Nabi, a great prophet. That's a lot of credentials, if you will, for a one man's resume. A lot of titles, but Dode David earned all of them. As such, and consistent with the 89th Mizmor, which is wholly appropriate for God to devote another song if you will, just to him because of his extraordinary lives. Uh, Theirs is the most important and beneficial relationship the world has ever or will ever know. Dowd is literally the antidote for Judaism, which denies that he accomplished any of these great feats to save his people from themselves. He is proof that the rabbis are wrong in claiming that only they can interpret the Torah because he did so beautifully. The Messiah and Son of God is also the antidote for Christianity, which purports that the Son of God's title and the title of Messiah applies to their misnomer. They simply stole it from Dowd, a crime of identity theft. Now, of course, another issue with Christianity is the religion purports according to Paul. Not according to God, mind you, but according to Paul. If you would prefer to trust Paul over God, that the Torah cannot save. And yet look at Dowd, who Yahweh constantly calls Sadak, right. And so he is an extraordinary individual for having slayed three religions that didn't even exist at the time of his first of three lives. So Yah's favorite songwriter is even the cure for the supposed enlightened ways of multicultural, socialistic, secular humanism, political correctness, wokeism, and progressivism, and that his rationale trumps all of their illusions. As such, the surest path to learning the truth and about approaching God on his terms is through the rhetoric, the lives, and the lyrics of Dowd. This is concerning Dowd, La Dowd, the beloved David, and of approaching Dowd. My nephesh, my soul, my consciousness, you have chosen to appreciate and acclaim. You have sought to adore, sharing the blessings and benefits, all of which can be uplifting. And this is the nephesh that has chosen to engage Yahweh such that the blessings are reciprocated by the association with Yahweh, God, as directed by his Torah in terms of its pronunciation, along with all that is within me, through and accompanied by his set apart name. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 1031. A very powerful introduction to this song, isn't it? The Dowd begins at a place that most people don't even consider. When I tell people that Dowd lived three lives and they had, their brains just steam over and eyes glaze over, and it's as if um, that a physical body is the full extent of their capability of even thinking. And yet, Dowd's physical body was meaningless. That's why this bodily resurrection of the counterfeit of Jesus is just so utterly inane, stupid. Um, Bodies are meaningless, souls are meaningful. This Mizmor focuses and opens on Dowd's soul, his nephesh. The nephesh is the only part of our being that can transcend our mortal lives. It is the part of us that God is going to raise and empower and enrich and emancipate so that we can enter the seventh dimension and be with him, so that he can empower us and enable us to explore the universe. Souls need to be accompanied by light energy, and they need to shed the physicality of a corporeal body to have their potential unleashed. Again, that's one of the reasons why the Christian New Testament is so utterly stupid. with its bodily resurrection. First, it didn't occur. Second, it's impossible. And third, it's counterproductive. So it's the last thing that we would want to see. Come here, Wookie. I have a Wookiee here, and he is dressed for the show. And so I wanted to show him off to you because, well, nobody outlooks the Wook. And this is the Wookiee with his very, very special party hat. Comes directly from Florida. Yes, indeed. I appreciate the Wookiness. And so my lovely wife is chuckling in the background now that she's put Wookiee's hat on and managed to get his ears through the hole. This is a family show, in case you didn't know. And so Wookiee, as our fur-faced friend, is a full contributor to the program. There really is very few things to get back to the show. Wookiee, want to make a comment? Yeah, me agrees. Nefeshes are cool. That when Paul, on behalf of his new religion, as a rabbi, managed to counterfeit the life of Dowd, he took it to places that, well, only pagan religions had gone. In the pagan religions of Babylon, of Rome, of Greece, of Egypt, there was always a dying and resurrecting Son of God. And so it's played off of Tammuz in the Babylonian religion. He was the son of the Son, the Son of the Father, who died every year and was resurrected bodily, of course. And the same thing was true with Osiris in the Egyptian religion. The primary model for the pagan aspects, the divine aspects of the counterfeit of Dowd as the transformed into the Christian myth is all based on Dionysus, including Easter week is all Dionysian. His birthday on January 25th, the winter solstice, all Dionysian. The idea that he would be resurrected in the spring, Dionysian, always, of course, on a Sunday. And it's I don't know if there's a better word for it than stupid, but that's just what it is. This notion that physical bodies can be or should be reanimated after death is, first of all, inconsistent with science. You do not raise a dead body, and bodies decay when they're alive, and they decay even more rapidly once they're dead. And this idea that you'll have someone resurrected in case of Islam and Christianity, hundreds and thousands of years after they have died, when their bones, their flesh is all gone, their sinews all gone, their bones are mostly deteriorated, and there's just nothing left to reanimate. It's, of course, an impossibility, because over time, living beings become the food for other living beings. But the worst part of it is, it's these physical bodies that keep us trapped here on Earth, that keep us trapped in the ordinary flow of time, that limit our lifespan as they do, and that deteriorate with age. It's the last thing you would want. Once you've been liberated of these and your soul is free of it and has the opportunity to be enmeshed in YAHOWAH, set apart spirit, which is energy and light, that's the option that makes sense, not resurrection. And so Dowd is spending his time focusing on his nefesh soul. Now, that's not to say that bodies are completely useless. And this life, you want to take care of yours. It is the carrier of your soul. And the other thing that they can perform and do many things. They can't do nearly the number of things that God has in store for us, but they can accomplish a great number of things here in this life. And Yahweh wrote the code, the language for our bodies. It's called DNA. And so, with someone like Dode, it would be exceedingly easy for Yahweh to take in his soul, which of course he did, into Shamaim to be with him after the end of his first life, which was approximately 968 BCE, 4 years prior to that, and which is year 3000 Yah, and bring him into to heaven, and his soul then would continue to experience being in Yahweh's presence, exploring the universe. It'd be a marvelous situation for him. And when it's time for Dode to come back in his second of 3 lives, then all Yahweh has to do is take some of Dode's original DNA and use it as the language to compose another physical body that his soul could occupy for that period of time. And once that soul had fulfilled its purpose as the body of the Passover lamb, it was incinerated. It had no more function. It was over. It didn't, you know, rise from the grave. In fact, it's interesting. Somebody sent a friend of mine an email talking about Joseph of Arimathea, and saying, there was no such place as Arimathea. And so, what are they even talking about? How you can't have a grave be provided for mythical Jesus by a Joseph from Arimathea when there was no such place. It's like adding the Jesus of Nazareth. Nazareth didn't even exist in the 1st century. It did exist in the 4th century, and Constantine's mommy decided that's where Jesus had to come from. So he became Jesus of Nazareth, and Eusebius, working for Constantine, simply worked it into the text because it doesn't appear in any manuscript prior to Eusebius and Constantine in the 4th century. Well, the same thing is true with Joseph of Arimathea. Constantine and Eusebius, to make the religion seem like, oh wow, there really was a resurrection, there was an empty tomb. They created the whole myth that the tomb belonged to this fellow called Joseph of Arimathea when there was no Arimathea. So the only person that even makes an attempt among the early church fathers to describe where it was the guy that came up with the myth in the first place, Eusebius. So there is no Jesus. No Jesus. There was no Nazareth. There was no Arimathea. And if there's no Joseph of Arimathea, there is no tomb, and therefore there is no empty tomb, and therefore there is no resurrection. I know that's evidence and reason, and a lot of people, particularly of religion, don't like that train of thought. Nevertheless, it's Dode's soul that matters. That's where this begins. That is a really big deal. If you don't have an appreciation of that, then you don't understand who we are, what Yahweh is offering us, what is valuable and what is not. I mean, you could be easily fooled, like all of the Muslims, into thinking that your physical body will be resurrected so that it can cavort all day long with virgins, or that if you're not a good Muslim, your physical body will be resurrected and you'll be tortured 24/7 by Allah and hell. That's how easy it is, of course, to fool people. Now, that same situation exists in Christianity, where they teach the utter idiocy of all souls going to either heaven or hell. Of course, that cannot be true, because should that be true, and that's not what God claims, then God would be sadistic. Anybody would say, love me, worship me, or I will torture you forever in hell, isn't worth knowing. They are a monster. And that's why you'll never find that kind of rhetoric in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. Only in the Christian New Testament and in the Quran do you find such ridiculousness. So it is important for you to know these kinds of things, and how if you're going to live beyond this mortal existence, you have to be in a position where you know how to go about shedding your physical body such that your nephesh soul, your consciousness, continues. Now, Wookie, we probably don't need to do that right there on the camera. Thank you there, buddy. But this is a G-rated show for families. Okay, thank you, Val. So it is. There's only one way for your soul to survive this mortal existence, and that is for you to know Yahweh, embrace His name, understand specifically what He is offering by the benefits of the covenant, and asking in return by the 5 conditions of the covenant, and how to receive those benefits through attending with understanding the Moed Mikre, particularly the first 3 that Dode fulfilled on our behalf with his corporeal body and with his soul. So in this particular case, it begins, my soul, you have chosen to appreciate and acclaim. So Nefesh Ani Barak. So it's as obvious as it could possibly be. Dode's not quite as verbose as I am, as I have gone into great lengths to tell you why this is true, but that's what this says. My soul, you have chosen to appreciate and acclaim. Your desire is to commend and adore it, to show the benefits from it that can be derived from it. And there is an aspect, by the way, of a nephesh that I have not mentioned, but I do want to also acknowledge, is that Wookiee here has a nephesh. Heck, even Rich back there as our producer, he has a nephesh. All of us have a nephesh, and I'm not so sure right now about Asher because she has some issues. Just kidding, Asher. I'm sorry about that. But what a nephesh enables us to do is to observe and respond to our environment. A nephesh is what makes animals different than plants. Plants are living things, but they don't have consciousness. They can't observe and respond to the environment. And our nephesh soul is not only the carrier of our personality, is not only the repository of our experiences, the carrier of our attitude and aptitudes, but it is the part of us that's able to identify God, to perceive God's existence, and then respond appropriately. So it's a very valuable thing, and you ought to value it as well. And it says here, not only is the soul appreciated, but it's appreciated for its association with Yahowah. Now, that's a killer for all 3 so-called Abrahamic religions. I mean, the fact is, Abraham didn't have a religion, he had a relationship, but that's what they call them. And in their case, guess what they're all missing? A Yahowah. And so without a Yahowah, you can't claim that this Mizmor, the 103rd, was inspired. And therefore, you need to toss it out and then toss out all the other Mizmor that are either about Dode or written by Dode. Because it's quite clear that Dode's Nefesh soul was acclaimed and appreciated for its association with Yahowah. And Yahweh's name is written out. It is bold. It is unmistakable. Along with all that within me, through the accompaniment and by being accompanied by his set apart Shem name. Yahweh's name is Kodesh. It's set apart. He is not Hashem. That would be just the name, and there are lots of names, therefore it would be common. But the name Yahweh is uncommon. It belongs to God and to no one else. It's God's one and only name. It is special, it is unique, it is profoundly important. Yahweh Shem is Kodesh. And the moment you lose sight of the fact that Yahweh's Shem is Kodesh and that his Shem is Yahweh, then you are estranged from him. There is no way to have a relationship with Yahweh, to have your soul benefit from what he is offering and not proclaim, not celebrate, not announce and convey Yahweh's name. So this is an essential teaching. So many things. And this is just the first statement of over 20 and the 103rd Mizmor. So Dowd is known for being a determined fighter and passionate lover. He is unified and enriched. He did both unification and enrichment of Yisrael. He defended Israel on 66 battles, won them all. He enriched Israel by bringing the country together and acquiring Jerusalem as the capital, preparing the Temple Mount for the home for Yahweh's name. And he left this vast treasure of Mashal and Mizmor, Proverbs and Psalms. He was, of course, Israel's greatest king. He is Israel's returning king. He is the only returning king. He was intellectual and emotional. He could wield swords and wield words with equal aplomb. He was typically courageous, but he had his moments of cowardice too. He was right about God, but often wrong about men. This spectrum is of the man seen through the words which shape his initial life among his people. But that's not how God sees him, or how God interacts with him. For Yahweh, and indeed for Dowd himself, it is his nephesh soul which matters, and Yahweh sees it as perfect and glorious. Now, our soul represents the essence of who we are. It is the operating system of our lives. Moreover, it is the only part of us that can transcend our mortal existence. And since our nephesh, like Yahweh's ruach, is feminine, this declaration speaking for her, and the next were scribed in the second person feminine singular. By doing so, Dowd is emphasizing the importance of his nephesh. Doesn't make Dowd girly. It's one of the advantages of many languages, including Hebrew, that have masculine and feminine nouns, because when you use he or she, you know the object being referenced. And in this case, by using she, feminine, Dowd's, well, we're continuing to talk about Dowd's soul. So the Nephesh consciousness provides each of us with this unique and wonderful opportunity to be observant and then to respond to what we hear, see, smell, touch, taste, think. And we can do so in conjunction with what man has to say or God. And while this was true for Dowd, as it is for us, there is a monumental distinction. And that is because Yahweh was able to use Dowd's nephesh soul as a living probe for him to experience and then fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. Yes, Dowd's corporeal body, his Bashar, fulfilled Pesach as the lamb, but it wouldn't have been Dowd's corporeal body unless it had been infused with Dowd's nephesh soul. And Dowd's nephesh soul did not die. It carried our guilt into Sheol on Matzah, while his physical body was incinerated after death, in keeping with the Torah. So, prior to, during, and most assuredly after Chag Matzah and the sacrifice in 33 CE, the body, his soul occupied, went from nondescript to dispensable, and then to non-existence. And that mattered because Dowd's soul was deployed to serve his people at this time in this manner as the Passover lamb, and that is the prescription in the Torah for the Passover lamb. For Christianity, for example, and all of its fake and fraud, to pretend that their guy was fulfilling Passover by being crucified, when it's Dode who explains that he would be the one who was crucified, writing about it 1,000 years in advance in the 22nd Mizmor. They butchered the text. They absolutely blew the whole plot of God's story, because to serve as the Passover lamb, your body can't be resurrected. It has to be extinguished. It has to be incinerated. So the very fact that there's this claim in Christianity that the dead God on a stick became a live God that could walk through walls is absurd, because what it does is it proves that he didn't fulfill any prophecies, because the story of the Passover lamb is that body has to be incinerated that night, not come back to life. Now, upon his upcoming arrival in 2033, which is year 6000 Yah, to fulfill Kippurim and Sukkah, Dode's soul will reside within a spiritual being. That isn't to say that he will not have a physical body, but that his physicality will be at his discretion. He will be able to transform some of his spiritual energy into a diminished material form whenever a body is beneficial. And that's the easiest of all answers as to how Dode went about fulfilling Pesach 1,000 years after his first of 3 lives was completed. Once Dode was taken to Shamayim and empowered by Yahweh, such that his soul was essentially now energy, based upon the formula E equals mc squared. Energy is the same thing as matter, it's just a much greater amount. And so he just reverse engineers some of his spiritual energy and places his nephesh soul into the material being, and it's done. This is something we don't even have to rely on Yahweh doing for us as we go forward. We'll be able to do the same thing Dode could have done for himself at any time going forward after the Shabuah harvest, the Teruah harvest. We will be able to take an aspect of our energy and light and transfer some of that into a material presence when it serves our interests. For example, I really want to have the opportunity to see other. I like to explore this galaxy, and I'd like to visit other galaxies. But that's, of course, not even remotely possible while we have a physical body, because even at the speed of light, which a physical body cannot move anywhere close to the speed of light, it just take forever to get there. And yet, if you don't have a physical body and you are light energy, since all time simply exists on a photon of light and speed is distance over time and time simply is, then it takes no time to get to any prescribed distance. And therefore, you are in a unique position at that point. And at any time that you can travel as an energy-based being, you get to a place that you want to enjoy a good meal, sing a nice song, you just want to put your feet in a cool stream, feel the warm breeze, you can do all of those things once you're there by transferring some of your spiritual energy into matter at your convenience. This is a beautiful aspect of what God is giving us. And he gives us this one example of it that helps us understand it, which is fire. And he's constantly associating his Moed Mikre with fire, where you take a physical being and you light it on fire, and then you watch what happens. And what happens is you take something that is an organic being, and which is decaying, and what the fire does is it transforms that physical material aspect of that combustible into light and to energy. And the light and energy are vastly more powerful. You see, you can feel it with the radiant energy. You can see the light. You can even see that the flames all rise up going towards the heavens. And there's this marvelous transformation from matter to energy, and the energy being light. So God shows it to us every time he uses light and fire as a metaphor. Now, for the better part of 24 years, this was the aspect of the Mikre's fulfillment that I had a tough time grasping. Although I was always on the right track, I knew that the only way that the Pesach lamb and the matzah soul could fulfill the chag matzah, this first two of the Moed Mikre, was by deploying a nephesh as a probe so that it could be used very much like we would use or we perceive avatars. Now, unwilling initially to accept the idea that Yahweh would use Dod's nephesh and a reconstituted version of Dod's physicality, I assumed that Yahweh had deployed his own. Yahweh has a nephesh. But that would have been out of character because Yahweh always advances his agenda through his chosen people. So now we know better. The only way that all of the prophetic testimony fits is if the soul serving to fulfill Chag Matzah is Dod's. His name and titles are not only cited within every such prophecy, but no one else is ever mentioned in any of these portrayals. Dod was not only Yahweh's firstborn and thus the proper fit for Bokorim firstborn children, he had ample motivation. He needed the respect that being the Passover lamb engendered, as much as his people and his father needed him to serve them in this manner. So I was correct up to a point. It was obvious that Chag Matzah was fulfilled by the deployment of a nephesh soul, and now we know whose. Dod's. Now, this association of Dod's soul and Yahweh's spirit became the most beneficial and rewarding collaboration in all history. And it's not over. Phases 1 and 2, yes, they're now in the books, foretold, endured, and fulfilled, while his third coming remains about 8.5 years away at the time of this episode of the YAHOWAH blog here in 2025. The Messiah has affirmed what we have come to realize. This was his choice, his decision. And as much as this was in Dod's interest, and it was also in the interest of the covenant family. Most of all, his souls recognized that he would be doing something wonderful, not only for God, but for all of us. And that was important because God had done so much for him. It was his opportunity to give something back. Nothing Dod has accomplished or will ever do would have amounted, by the way, to a hill of beans, much less a ridgeline of Zion and a Mount Moriah, if not accomplished in association with Yahweh, which is why this says it's the association with Yahweh and respect for Yahweh's name that provided Dod's soul with its acclaim. Said another way, Dod's name is great among men, but God's name is infinitely greater still. And together, they are life. There are very few things, and perhaps nothing, that Yahweh values more than us knowing and using his name. And I shouldn't really say nothing, because there is something that God values more than his name. That is his son. Not so much his son's name, although he values it, certainly. It's really what his son accomplished, what his son achieved, what he and Dode did together. Yahweh takes great pride in his son Dode. And really nothing aggravates God more than when his son is devalued and depreciated by the interference of and interjection of counterfeits through identity theft, as was the case in Jesus and Bar Kokhba, even Muhammad to some extent. And second on to that, he is grieved when his name is nullified, modified, misused, misappreciated. It says, my soul, my nephesh, my consciousness, the essence and living aspect of my persona, which can be observant and responsive and which conveys my personality, my character, attributes, and experiences. Your desire is to commend and adore, being thankful for the benefit of sharing the blessings of the association with YAHOWAH. Wow. I mean, it's just so obvious. It's a shame that so many people missed it for so long. My soul, my consciousness, for it, your desire is to commend it and adore it, being thankful for being able to share the blessings associated with this association between my soul with YAHOWAH. And that, my friend, is the answer. Dode's soul is, well, the most magnificent to have breathed on this planet. But it's his association with YAHOWAH that makes it all universal. The statement continues, you will never overlook, ignore, or forget. You will never be unmindful for or fail to properly respond to any of his accomplishments and the resulting benefits. Mizmor lyrics to be sung, Psalm 103:2. No, it's true. Never, not in all time, not even in eternity, will YAHOWAH overlook, forget, ignore, be unmindful of, fail to respond to, be remiss in mentioning the accomplishments of Dode's Nefesh soul. Dode not only unified God's people, Yisrael, not only acquired Jerusalem as Yahweh's city, not only acquired the Temple Mount where the home for Yahweh's name would reside, not only demonstrated the kind of love that Yahweh is seeking between us and him, not only exemplified the perfect Son, not only served as a great prophet, not only brought God great joy through the lyrics of his songs and the melody of his voice, not only the greatest mind and orator of all time, not only the great shepherd who would tend God's flock, not only the great fighter who defended God's people. Most of all, Dode had the intellect and the interest to follow the story of the Torah through what happened between Abraham, Sarah, and Ishak, to realize that when they went to Mount Moriah and there was to be a sacrifice, and yet Yahweh provided the lamb, that as he read on and saw the role of that lamb and the fulfillment of Passover in conjunction with firstborn sons, it became obvious to him that since God had called him his firstborn son, that it was Bedod that would fulfill Passover. He realized that is how the benefits of Passover, which are extended life, would be provided. And then he realized that as the children of Israel didn't experience freedom on Pesach, but had a lovely meal and their lives spared, that it wasn't until Matzah that they were freed of the religious and political corruption that had enslaved them in Mitzrayim. And Dode obviously figured out that the yeast that is being removed from the bread was symbolic of the children of Israel being removed from the religious and political corruption of Mitzrayim. And that political and religious guilt, which was symbolically swallowed by the sea upon the Exodus as the children of Israel crossed as a metaphor for Bikurim, firstborn children, and then the pursuing army of Pharaoh was swallowed by it. Dode figured out that I need to take the guilt of my people and take it very, very far away. And Yahweh and he came to understand the way to do that is to take the guilt of every covenant member and to carry it into Sheol on Matzah, to be disassociated from them forever. And Dode also realized that what Bikurim, since it means firstborn children, and he understood the breaking and the crashing of the waters, that as the children of Israel crossed through the Red Sea and entered back into the base of Mount Choreb to be enlightened by the Torah and Yahweh's presence, that was symbolic of firstborn children. And as the firstborn, the Towrah of God, he knew that he was being invited to fulfill these Moed Mekre. And he also recognized that leading the children of Israel, which Moshe did for 40 years, was essentially an impossible task. Jews are irascible. They're cantankerous. They're really lousy listeners, exceedingly ungrateful. And Dode realized that something extraordinary would have to happen, something better than the character even of Moshe, to earn their trust to the extent that, well, they would do what they weren't even willing to do for Yahweh, where they told Yahweh to shut up and go away. But Dode recognized that if he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, then every single soul that would be part of his covenant family, for him to be king over that family forevermore, would be there because of what he has done, and that we would all owe him our lives. And, well, that would tend to get everybody's attention. And that is the accomplishment and the resulting benefit from Dode's soul that Yahweh will never overlook and will never forget. That is the message that is being conveyed here. And that gets us to the point of these programs. The lyrics for Psalm 103, 1 and 2 have been available for 3,000 years. And in 3,000 years, no one has explained them to you this way. And it's only when they are seen this way that they have benefit to you. And now you know why Yahweh and I spent 24 years studying every word that he said, analyzing his message from the oldest extant witnesses in the Dead Sea Scrolls, looking at every nuance of every letter of every word, writing these very unique, profoundly important, correct, and amplified complete translations, easily to verify, and then composing the 25 books about them before we began these programs. Because it is that foundation of knowing, and then that process of making the connections that I'm sharing with you now to understand, that provides the kind of insights that enable you to capitalize upon them so that your soul transitions its mortality and enters eternity. Why, Dode now led the way, and my job is to reflect his brilliance. His experience with YAHOWAH should encourage the rest of us. The more devoted we are to serving him, the more devoted he is to serving us. The more we accomplish, the more we are rewarded. And with God, the benefits infinitely exceed our contribution. His plan offers the greatest return on investment that has ever been offered anyone. So Dode contributed more than anyone else, and he is being compensated appropriately for that. Now, I'm not suggesting something as utterly insane as the Christian pick up your cross and follow me nonsense. There would be no benefit, capacity, motivation, or purpose for any of us to attempt a second fulfillment of Pesach and Matzah. But we can serve to awaken his people such that they appreciate what he has accomplished. Dode's association with YAHOWAH is multidimensional. It is intellectual and emotional, engaging and conversational, inspiring and pragmatic, enlightening and enriching. In his first life, he was a brilliant and receptive student studying under the perfect teacher. And everything he learned, he shared, never overlooking or omitting anything with respect to his life with YAHOWAH. Therefore, we can benefit Kol Gemul Hu with everything Yah has done and the kindness he has shown, all of his accomplishments and resulting benefits, in the same manner enjoyed by YAHOWAH's most celebrated son, this exceptional Nefesh soul. So Dode's commitment to sharing everything he learned from and achieved with God over his lifetimes in the center of Yah's universe makes him, well, not only uniquely important to God, but also to us. When we read and respond to his testimony on behalf of YAHOWAH, we are rewarded. When we share it, we spread the wealth. God has so much to offer that we, as covenant heirs to the universe, rather than being shortchanged by having more heirs from which the universe will be divided, are actually enriched because the universe now appears to be infinite. And so the more of us there are, the richer the experience will be. Now, after letting us know exactly where his Nefesh soul stood in relationship to YAHOWAH, Dode proposed a series of rhetorical questions, which were designed to encourage us to come to the same conclusion. YAHOWAH's collaboration with Dode's soul brought salvation to the covenant family. And to be consistent, there was only one way for father and son to achieve this result, which was through the Torah's presentation of the Bereth as fulfilled through the Mikra. This remains true to this day, and that is what makes Dode's song so inspiring. This statement now is going to be the last of this program. I hope that we have communicated effectively in our new Ocean studio. We have another version of our Shure Studio mic, so this is the best that um, for this particular purpose. We have the full array of lights. We've got the Wookiee and his party hat. We have all of, in fact, our single best camera, having been moved outdoors for this purpose. Um, and we have Richard behind the controls to bring it all to you. So we are hoping that this turns out to be a productive environment for us to continue this series on a voice so that we can voice the lyrics sung about and sung by God's beloved Son. Now, I'm going to share this passage with you. We'll return to it in our next program, but I always like to give God the last word. Who? It's from Ha, indicating either that a question is being asked or the answer is being addressed and the source is being identified. Who forgives, removing culpability from consideration so as to pardon. Shalak eliminates guilt. All of your errant thinking, wrongdoing, erroneous statements, and distorted opinions. Lakol eon ata. Everything you have twisted and perverted with warped thinking. And who promotes restoration for everything which otherwise incapacitates and sickens you, including all of your diseases and disabilities. Mizmor lyrics to be sung, Psalm 103:3. The answer is Yahweh working with Dode. It is Father and Son. It is the Mareth covenant being fulfilled by the first three Moed Mikre, Pesach, Matzah, Bakorim, in 33 CE, by the man who lived in God's company in year 3000 Yah. I thank you for listening, and we'll return to this place in our Ocean studio and our second episode on A Voice. Thank you for listening.